This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this special training, What is Stalking, in honor of National Stalking Awareness Month, which is January. My name is Melanie Jackman. I work with Montgomery County Women's Center. We are a local nonprofit that works with victims of domestic violence and sexual assault in Montgomery County in the great state of Texas. All right, we are going to start today looking at the definition of stalking. Stalking is defined as a pattern of behavior directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to fear for that person's safety or the safety of others, or suffer substantial emotional distress. It's important to note that stalking is a crime in all 50 states, U.S. territories, tribal lands, and the District of Columbia, including the military. We're going to take just a couple of minutes and break down the definition of stalking just a little bit more. So as we said, stalking is defined as a pattern of behavior. Sometimes there's some questions that come up with that, including how many incidents does it take to make a pattern. We generally see that 2 or more incidents can make a pattern. However, definitions of stalking vary from state to state. It's important to be familiar with your state's laws about stalking. What types of behaviors are considered stalking? So stalkers use a variety of tactics, including but not limited to unwanted contact, including phone calls, texts, contact via social media, which accounts for about 66% of stalking cases. Additionally, stalkers can use tactics like spreading rumors, which constitutes about 36%, following the victim or spying on them, 34%, unwanted letters and emails, 31%, showing up places that the victim is at, 31%, and leaving unwanted gifts, looking at about 12%. So what do we do if stalkers' behavior is not necessarily illegal? So stalking is a crime, again, in all 50 states, District of Columbia, U.S. territories, the military, and tribal lands. Some of the behaviors that make up the crime of stalking are criminal on their own, such as destroying someone's property. Even if the behavior is not a crime on its own, something like texting excessively, it may be able to prove the pattern of stalking behavior. So victims should absolutely be documenting and reporting every incident that happens. All right. So again, we see that this definition of stalking is a pattern of behavior directed at a specific person. So what does a specific person mean? So stalking is typically directed at a specific person, i.e. the victim. However, stalkers often contact the victim's family, friends, and or coworkers as part of their pattern of stalking. So who is likely to be stalked? Anyone can be a victim of stalking. The majority of stalking victims are stalked by someone that they know, generally a current or former intimate partner, acquaintance, or even a family member. So you might be wondering if men or women are more likely to be stalked. So the majority of stalking victims are female. However, people of all genders can be stalked. It's estimated that 1 in 6 women and 1 in 17 men will experience stalking in their lifetime. All right, so again, the definition is a pattern of behavior directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety or the safety of others. So let's dig into fear. So the definition of stalking includes that a reasonable person would feel fear if experiencing this. It's important to note that fear is often masked by other emotions, including anger, frustration, hopelessness, or despair. Many stalkers' behavior seems innocuous or even desirable to outsiders. For example, sending expensive gifts. The stalker's actions don't always seem scary, and sometimes are hard to explain. It's important to realize that context is critical in stalking cases. Consider this story. A woman calls the police hysterical. All she's able to say is, "There's a cup of coffee in my car." Understandably, the police don't understand what the big deal is and don't see the situation as urgent. Eventually, she's able to say, "He's here, he's here." It turns out that this is a stalking victim who had moved to escape her abusive ex-boyfriend who was stalking her for some time. She did not believe that he knew where she was. When she left for work that morning, there was a cup of coffee in her car with his old nickname for her on it. She was absolutely terrified. Again, context is critical to understanding stalking. Something may be frightening to a victim, but not to you as the responder or the advocate. Stalking behaviors often have a specific meaning that may only be understood between the offender and the victim. If the cause for fear is not intuitive to you, it's essential to ask victims, why did that scare you? Or what about that situation or incident caused you fear? Stalking criminalizes otherwise non-criminal behavior. It's not illegal to text someone or send them a gift or ring their doorbell unless it is part of a stalking course of conduct. So how can we explain what's going on? Again, fear is contextual. So what's scary to one person may not be scary to another. In stalking cases, many of the behaviors are only scary to the victim because of their intimate relationship with the stalker. For example, a bouquet of roses is not scary on its own, but when a victim receives a bouquet from an ex-boyfriend who she recently relocated to get away from, and she did not think that he knew where her new home was, this flower delivery becomes extremely terrifying and can be threatening. It's essential for responders to ask about and understand why certain behaviors are scary for the victim. So what if the victim is more irritated or angry than afraid? People react to stalkers in a variety of ways. Some may seem irritated or angry rather than scared, while others may minimize or dismiss the stalking behavior as not a big deal. Irritation, anger, and or minimizing may be their way of masking fear. It's helpful to consider how the victim may change their behaviors to cope with the stalking. We may want to ask them questions about have they been changing their traveling routes, how they get to school or how they get to and from work, where they grocery shop. We may want to ask them if they've been avoiding certain locations or screening phone calls. These may all be indicators that the victim is actually afraid. All right, so how is stalking different than harassment? So stalking and harassment are actually similar and can overlap. Harassment may be part of a stalking pattern of behavior or course of conduct. Generally, the element of fear is what separates stalking from harassment. Harassment is typically irritating and bothersome, sometimes to the point where the victim feels deeply uncomfortable. However, victims of harassment are not typically afraid of their perpetrators. For example, a colleague who is consistently mocking a new coworker for her appearance may be harassing her by saying cruel things and sending disparaging emails. While the victim is distressed and may feel sad, anxious, angry, and or uncomfortable, she is not generally afraid of the perpetrator. She does not believe that the behaviors will escalate or that further harm will come to her. However, if that same perpetrator began calling the victim's personal cell phone, following the victim, and or posting disparaging things about the victim online, this could in fact become stalking. As we said before, the prevalence of stalking happens quite often. We see that 1 in 6 women and 1 in 17 men in the United States will experience stalking in their lifetime. All right, so the vast majority of the time, victims of stalking know their perpetrators. The majority of stalkers are intimate partners, either current or former, and stalking is a method of exerting power and control in an abusive relationship. It's also essential to realize that many stalkers are not intimate partners. Particularly for male victims, stalkers are often acquaintances. So we can see by the graph on this slide that for female victims, 52% of them are being stalked by a current or former intimate partner, and 43% of males experience the same thing. For female victims, we see acquaintances account for 26% of stalkers, while male victims, it's 37%. Strangers is quite low, 17%, and 15% for males. Family members, female victims are stalked 11% of the time by a family member, male victims 7%, and person of authority, we see female victims experience this 3% of the time and males 2% of the time. Dangers of stalking. So it's important to realize that stalking can be a major predictor of violence and even homicide or murder. Okay, many stalkers directly attack their victims. So we see that over 1 in 5 stalking cases involve a direct attack on the victim. Additionally, 1 in 5 stalkers use a weapon to threaten or harm their victims, and 76% of female homicide victims were stalked before the murder took place. So it's definitely important that we are working with a client. If we are a friend or a family member of someone who believes that they may be a victim of stalking, that we get them in contact with an agency that can assist them, that we look online and we get incident reports, incident logs, so we can help them track the instances to establish that pattern for a stalking case. And then we get them in touch with law enforcement as soon as possible. So how can we help? At Montgomery County Women's Center, we offer a wide variety of free services, including free counseling, free legal assistance. We also have an emergency shelter and a transitional housing program. Down below, you'll see all of our contact information. So our business office, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Can reach out if you have any questions. Our counseling office phone number and extension is there, as well as legal. And then our 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week crisis hotline information is there. Please feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions. And we are thankful that you joined us today. Thanks very much and have a great afternoon.